should have been recording this now. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the February Professionally Evil Lunch and Learn. It's the last Friday of every month is what we try to hit. And I see a lot of names on here that have been here in the past. If you're new, let me just kind of give you a short rundown of what we do. The goal of this is to say, screw the marketing, screw the slides. We're not trying to sell you anything. This is just a fun opportunity to sit around with some security professionals, talk about current events. 2022. Did I not say 2022?
I was just throwing it in there.
Oh, okay. It feels like it should be like 2020 still. I don't know. The year's crazy. But yeah, like I don't remember when it was. Some of us were sitting around after a con. I think we were maybe having drinks at a bar or something. And it's like, man, we should record this, right? Like those conversations. And I'm like, you know what? Let's do that every month. Let's just sit down and recreate those conversations that we would normally have around a few beers and rant and rave about security topics and whatnot. And the best part is, hey, you get free CPEs, right? So you can count this as ongoing security education for whatever that's worth. So if you have conversations, if you have questions, if you have, hey, I want you to talk about this topic, or I think you're stupid and completely disagree, or you're missing the point, throw it in the chat there. We have that. I'd love to have that conversation. Every once in a while we get some creative ideas or topics that we hadn't thought about, and we may pivot if we can. We'll see. We've got a list of topics and current events and ideas and things that we're going to discuss, and we'll kind of pick and choose and see where the conversation goes. Sometimes we do a dozen topics and sometimes we do two. There's not really much of a plan other than just to have a good time for the next hour. I also wanted to mention our Professionally Evil Slack. I don't actually have that up, so I can't see it if anybody pings us, but I'm going to ping over there. If you have questions about, not questions, if you have conversation topics or just want to engage on a more regular basis, you can do that. It's professionallyevil.com. I bet Elle will post a link in chat here in just a second. And you can go get a free invite there. It's just a free community for us to engage and interact and have a good time. With that, let me do some introductions. My name is Nathan Sweaney. I'm one of the security consultants here at Secure Ideas. Carrie Randolph is joining us. Carrie is a senior security consultant from Go Security Pro. It's not Go Pro Security, no matter how many times I want to say that. Go Security Pro. We were noticing when I Googled Go Security earlier, Google shows like a map of their location, and it covers the entire contiguous US and then like Alaska and Hawaii, but cuts off like half of Mexico and half of Canada. So if you live in the other half of Canada or the other half of Mexico, I bet they would still work with you. Give them a call. But if you're inside the, the left half and the north half of Mexico or anywhere in the US, they can definitely help you out. They do the same types of things we do. Great company. I love all the folks over there. So check them out. And then Bill McCauley, also one of our senior security consultants here at Secure Ideas. He's been on these in the past. We are not ZZ Top imitators, no matter how much that comes across.
At least not professionally.
Not professionally. We should do that sometime. That needs to be like an April Fool's thing or something coming up.
Oh, we could do that.
The next AfterCon that we're all at, we need to find the bar that has karaoke.
Yes. Bill, are you coming to B-Sides? Okay.
I believe so.
Maybe the plan is for Bill to come to B-Sides. Okay. I didn't mention. So Bill is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Really kind of the boondocks outside of Dallas-Fort Worth. He lives out in the middle of nowhere.
I can see Dallas if I climb up on my roof or something.
Yeah. Sure you can. And Carrie is here in Tulsa with me somewhere. Owasso? Claremore? I don't know. There. The Tulsa metro area. You can look up the county assessor's office and figure out where she lives if you care that much.
Great OSINT tip. Thank you for
Yeah. Hey, it's all public information out there anyway. All right. Well, let's jump in. It's good to have you guys. Love seeing some of the conversation. Julio suggested karaoke at B-Sides. Okay. Julio is one of our other organizers. Carrie's one of the organizers as well at B-Sides. Okay. I love the karaoke idea. Maybe we can do that. So let's jump in. The first thing that I'm going to throw this out just for fun. How many people play Wordle? Have you guys gotten into that?
I have not. But I'm wondering if
it's a fun game. Wordle. Carrie, have you played Wordle?
I'm too old to be a hipster.
Oh my gosh. It's not a hipster thing. It's an old person. Like it's it's a word game, right?
That's
It's a lot of fun. I got into it a little while. I kind of got tired and quit doing it. But what's interesting, what I thought was funny about this, and it's not nearly as cool if you guys don't play it, then I guess, but it's basically a word game. You guess a word, and then it tells you. It's kind of like Mastermind. Do you ever play that when you were little?
Mm-hmm.
Where you like one person puts some pegs in a deal, and then you have to guess what color they are. Anyway, I thought this was an interesting article. New York Times bought Wordle from this like single developer dude that just made it on a whim. New York Times bought it and then said, hey, let's add in all these ad trackers and all this advertising stuff and keep track, which makes sense. I mean, why else are they going to buy stuff?
Yeah. Well, that goes back to that. If the thing's free, then you're the product, right? So it's back to that mentality.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is it hipster to enjoy the New York Times? Does anybody pay for the New York Times? Just curious.
Good question.
I have family members that are like religious about the New York Times crossword puzzle.
Oh, I can see that.
So it makes it like, it's one of those things that I probably wouldn't have put like 2 and 2 together, but hindsight, it makes total sense that they would be interested in that.
Yeah.
In Wordle.
Does anybody pay for a newspaper at all in general? I heard somewhere the other day, the New York or the Tulsa World was like $600 or $700 a year for a subscription. And that just blew my mind. Like that people still pay that. David, I paid for it in the 70s. I had some free subscriptions when I was in college, like USA Today and the Daily Oklahoman. Like they gave free subscriptions to college kids.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever paid.
Gordon mentioned the Star Wars, Star Trek crossword puzzle. Did you guys see that the other day?
No, did not.
I don't know if anybody can find a link. That was a really cool. They created a crossword puzzle where the answer was either like one of the answers was either Star Wars or Star Trek. And the clue was something like, the best sci-fi series or something like that. And then all of the like perpendicular questions had vague answers where it could either be Star Wars or Star Trek. It was not clear which one was the right answer, right? Like they intentionally designed it so that either one would work. It was really neat.
Interesting.
But yeah, anyway. Okay. Well, Wordle was a failure.
I've got to have to look that one up.
Yeah. So as I was going through articles, there was a ton about Ukraine. That's obviously a huge thing right now. What do you guys think? I don't even know where to start with these articles. Did any of them like jump at you as like, hey, let's start here?
It may just be the way my brain works, but like, I don't, there's value in starting the conversation like, hey, what's going on recently? But like, I couldn't help but think about like, this isn't new.
No.
Ukraine has been like Russia's little experimental test bed for years. And like, was it 2014 the last time this happened with Crimea? And there was the Petya and not Petya, and like the Eternal Blue SMB attacks, all of that. I mean, so it's like, this isn't new. It's just I think with all the ransomware that's been going on the past few years, people are seeing the things that the security industry has been screaming for years is finally hitting mainstream. I feel it's kind of like the pandemic, like people that are in the industry. It's like, hey, we've been screaming about, we're not prepared for this. We're not prepared for this for years. Then COVID hits. And I feel like this is the same thing for the cybersecurity industry.
Yeah, that's what I thought. You mentioned not Petya. People have always talked about what's cyber war going to look like, and is cyber war going to be like traditional, kinetic warfare where we send troops in or we go do this thing. And I've always said like, it's going to be more, hey, we build out capabilities and we have known vulnerabilities that may be patched by the time we want to use them. They may not. We have known exploits, but here are some types of things we can do. And then it's going to be a little bit of chaos of like, let's just release something, see what happens, and then pivot and escalate from there, and then see how we can use that to our advantage for other kinetic stuff. I think NotPetya was a great example of a test case, maybe. I don't know. Is that fair?
A test case from what perspective?
Well, like
angles you could discuss that from.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. I meant like from the Russian perspective of saying, hey, let's launch this against the Ukraine. I don't know if everybody remembers the details there. with NotPetya, they basically, it was they compromised, I think it was a tax program that like all the accountants in Ukraine used to file their taxes, and they put some malware into the update system of that tax system, so that when basically everybody in the Ukraine, when they updated their tax accounting system, they got the malware, it spread throughout all of the systems, and then eventually started spreading out and affecting everybody else around the world as well, because it wasn't well maintained.
Mhm.
But to me, that seemed like Russia just testing out, like, hey, can we do this? What does this look like? How can we, do this kind of stuff?
And another thing so I'm looking at Eric's comment there, where the cyber warfare is the predecessor to the kinetic assaults.
Mm-hmm.
That mentality, anytime, if that's a common warfare strategy where you weaken the supports, right? All the way back, there's always some aspect of that where you soften up the defenses so that you can have an easier time. And in fact, that was a similar thread to a lot of the articles that we were looking through with the DDoS attacks on the banks, the different types of financial telecom type interference, those types of things. As warfare progresses, it's not a stretch at all to see this type of cyber tools, for lack of a better term to use, but cyber tools, cyber strategies to be leveraged for that same purpose, to soften something up. Because if you can sow panic, if you can sow fear, if you can disrupt communications, I mean, if you've got a natural disaster, we talk about this in our CISP stuff, that if you've got a natural disaster, if you've got a man-made threat of some sort, then both of those need to be taken into account. And one of the biggest things is, okay, you've lost all your infrastructure, you've lost all this stuff. How do you effectively communicate, right? What are your backups for being able to pass the information you need from where the information is being generated to the places that need to be able to react to it? I see you throwing the links in there.
It's like just thinking like, okay, like locally, I can't remember the name of the network offhand, but Oklahoma actually does have like a first responders network. So, we've like the last big tornado that hit here in like 2014, 2015, maybe, cell towers are out, communications are down. How are first responders going to actually communicate boots on the ground? And they have set up like special networks that first responders, National Guard.
Is that FirstNet?
I was thinking that was what it was called, but I was.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I kind of left out her past. Carrie used to work for OMES, which is the Office of Management and Enterprise Services for the state of Oklahoma. I can't remember what your title was, Carrie.
Officially, it was IT strategist for the State Department of Education. It was more like a CIO IT director role.
Right, for all of the Department of Education, effectively, right, for the state. Yeah.
I served some other agencies too, but primarily education.
Yep. I'm sorry though. You were talking about that public first responder network and whatnot that we've got set up. I know the U.S. has similar types of things set up. Federally wise. You know what I mean? I think that's interesting from a perspective of what would that look like. Like, we're watching Russia attack Ukraine. Ukraine is significantly smaller, much less resources. What would that look like in a larger attack? Let's pretend it. Who cares whether it's Russia or China or North Korea or somebody else? What would that look like with the U.S.? These types of things.
Well, I mean, Department of Homeland Security issued a bulletin last month saying that the entire country, all organizations needed to be prepared for cyber attacks. Russia has blatantly said that if U.S. or anyone else interferes with their invasion of the Ukraine, they are not going to hold back from cyber attacks. I think specifically, we're going to see ICS and SCADA systems hit hard. Like you always hear warfare, communications is key. Yeah. Communications, there's so many different modes of communications, and we've been prepared for that, whether it's cell or like the FirstNet, other different things. Like, was it last year, Colonial Pipeline?
Yep.
One set of credentials was compromised, and it caused national emergencies.
Right.
Exceptions. I mean, there was no, I think, what is it in DC? After 3 to 5 days of Colonial Pipeline being shut down, 80% of the gas stations in Washington, D.C. were out of gas. People were hoarding. It was, like you said, sowing panic, sowing fear among the populace. GG on the ham radio comment. That's awesome. We'll have to harken back to like old call sign days.
That's always one of those things that I'm like, it'd be really cool to get my ham license and do that. And then I go back to stuff that I actually have to do. It's like,
you don't even want to put Christmas lights up and take them down on your house. You really want to be up there installing that big ass antenna?
Oh, I know. I love the fact that you say antenna, because that's how I was brought up pronouncing that word. And my wife gives me such a hard time. Yeah, but she's like, no, it's antenna. I'm like, I don't care. I was taught to antenna. It's
like, was it like 10 and 10?
Yeah.
You just said the same word twice. Yeah, CB. Yeah, I come from a place in rural Kansas where like half the people still have CBs in their old Silverados. So so I think it's interesting from a communications perspective. There was another article here. Here we go. The state of New York opens a joint security operations center in New York City. I'm not sure. I don't remember if this was a state thing or a city thing, actually, now that I say it. Here's the link.
Which one was this? The joint security operations, New York?
Yeah. So I know one of the things that has often come up, we've had customers ask, like, all right, so what type of threat feeds should we be watching, right? Like we've got vulnerability management going. We've got, some detection and alerting and monitoring. We're doing all these type of things. But we want to be a little bit more cutting edge than where we are now. What's the next step? Like, where do we watch for common attacks and, ongoing stuff? I think this is interesting that the New York City has offered this as a, my understanding is any company can basically sign up and get part of that threat feed to know, here's what to watch for. And here's some.
Oh, okay. That's something that I didn't catch when I was looking through the article. So one of the things that I noticed was there's a commingling of different levels of government where you've got the state, right? You've got the local, you've got the states, you've got the federal, and there's a mix of different interests there. And on one side, I love the idea of having that consolidated threat feed. What the article didn't clarify, at least for me, was how those things are being defined, right? What are the targets? What are the boundaries for that? Because typically those different levels have very different priorities, and so to have a mix of that makes me wonder about how those interests are being balanced between the actual technical things that are being accomplished versus the individual goals and priorities and the drivers for each of those different entities. So I'm curious to see how it works out, because it may turn out really, really well. On the other end, it may not. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, not only to that side, just different size companies, right? We work with really small companies, really big companies, a university in some random state, a public university, the types of threats and the things they're concerned about as far as incoming traffic is going to look different than, a mom and pop grocery store on the other side of the country. And so like, how do you provide, I'm sure there's some crossover, right? They all need to know about like, hey, these are common, botnet servers, or, here's, indicators of compromise, certain IP addresses and whatnot. But then like certain types of attacks, things that are going after a POS reseller, point of sale reseller, are going to be different than, somebody going after law firms. So maybe they're not. I don't know. I'm asking that question.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the metrics. Go ahead.
The other piece of it, other than the technical side and like, hey, what's the real like value? Like, what's the information that local businesses can get to actually better protect themselves? Is if this is a government organization, it has to be government funded, which is generally from taxpayer dollars. And as we're all taxpayers, we all have very strong opinions on how our tax dollars should be spent, how they're put to most efficient uses. it takes a lot of money and resources to efficiently run a SOC, especially if you're doing threat hunting, threat analysis. You're putting that together into a format that not only tech people can understand, but laymen can understand. How many local businesses, like they've picked up a Cisco router from Walmart, and they're hoping that the embedded firewall inside of that's going to protect them, like small little doctor's offices and things like that, So it's like, how do you really fund it and plan it to be valuable? And it's like, how much are they recreating the wheel? How much cross collaboration is there between the federal agencies and other states that have similar things that they could be leaning on each other? It makes me think kind of like, NASA monitoring for incoming meteors that are going to destroy the earth and everything. And it's like, well, they're only funded to watch like 2% of the
right
of the universe or what's coming at us.
Yeah, I feel like about every 2 or 3 months we see some article of this massive asteroid passed within a half mile of Earth, and we missed it, and they didn't even see it until it went past. Yeah, the speaking of OMES, when you were there, Carrie, I know that was one of the things when Oklahoma said, "Hey, we're going to create this Office of Management and Enterprise Services." Is that what it was?
Yes.
Like there was a lot of agencies that said, "Hey, that's great. We'll just keep doing our own thing," because people think, well, I don't want to give up some of my autonomy to this other organization, or, it'd be great to maybe have some of the services, but you can't tell me what to do type thing. Is that fair? Like, is that a common thing?
Not kind of, but not exactly. So a House bill was passed. It wasn't that some agency just arbitrarily decided, hey, we want to do a consolidated IT. It was a House bill that was passed. So the Office of State Finance in Oklahoma became the Office of Management Enterprise Services. In the House bill, it says, hey, these agencies are mandated to use centralized IT services, and other certain organizations like higher ed, the Senate and the House excluded themselves. A couple other parameters, they are exempted. You don't have to fall under this. So it was really like a scramble of like a lot of legislation. It's like, oh my God, this passed. How are we going to do this? And then, there's always a power struggle. It would be the same akin to maybe your company gets bought out by somebody else. So it's like, oh, in the past, I had full control over my IT staff. I could go in and tell them what to do. Maybe you guys that are developers are all familiar with like, hey, I'm really supposed to be working on this project, but somebody who's pretty high up the chain has told me, stop doing that project. Come in here and fix my thing and add my cool little tooltip button instead. Right. And it wrecks your entire project timelines, yada, yada. So it's kind of more like that. So I'm honestly really proud of the strides that OMES has made for serving state agencies. There's always fear, change, doubt, uncertainty and doubt, the whole flood complex when there's changes like that on that mass scale. And then you add in all the political stuff and all the different power struggles between like appointed directors, elected officials. It can get a little shady and a little hard for the IT professionals that really just want to keep the lights on and do provide good services. But like OMES's security team under Matt Singleton, they've been doing some really cool stuff, and they've got some cool stuff coming down, like a local ISOC. So I'm excited to see what's going to come out of some of the changes going on here.
Yeah, I am too. I know I'm good friends with Ray Davison from Michigan, and he's part of the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. And funny, he and I were talking a month ago about, hey, they're wanting to take what they've built and do it in other states. And I think that fits a lot like what we're talking about here with Russia and Ukraine and stuff like that, like providing resources so that smaller municipalities and smaller companies have somebody they can lean on, right? And Michigan has built this out over the last 10 years. So I was like, hey, let's do this in Oklahoma. I know some people. We'll get a bunch of people on a call. We'll figure it out. And then I found out a few days ago, like, oh, OMES has already started the process. Like they've got the Oklahoma Cyber Civilian Corps started. I don't know the process. I don't know that there's any legislation or funding or anything significant there, but it's exciting to see that process. Yeah, it's brand new, but It's exciting. I hope that idea continues in other states. I've kind of compared it to like a not Army Reserve, but like National Guard, right? Like the state has a National Guard they can call out to help with certain things. This is more like a civilian organization of security professionals that whenever there's an incident or an organization that doesn't have the resources to help, here's some people that can, volunteers that can help step up and help fill that gap a little bit. I think that'll be a cool thing.
I hope so. It's good intentions. And it's just how's it going to be executed, and then how's it going to be maintained? Yeah. And when, an event actually happens that could trigger, hey, let's engage this team. What does that look like? Like, we have protocols for like, hey, let's have state government engage the National Guard and call up the reserves and that whole thing. But if it's a civilian corps, it's, man, are we making cybersecurity militia?
So
guys, that's crazy.
It is kind of the way they do it in Michigan, and I think it's the model because it's the only place where this has worked out well. They've got a budget, like they have actual money from the state. I think it's like $400,000 or $500,000 a year, and they pay for training. So everybody who's a certified member of the team, who's been validated, they get training every year on incident response and forensics and stuff like that. And then it's a volunteer thing. Whenever there's a need, and the need is usually identified by like the state police or the State Bureau of Investigation, they come in and do the law enforcement side and then hand it off to, once they're done with the law enforcement side, then they hand it off to the Cyber Civilian Corps to come in and help clean up and help companies address it.
So like it just kind of triggered a thought. Like I don't mean for like this whole presentation to be like focused on Oklahoma, but you guys have kind of pushed it that way, so I'm going to run with it.
Bill's close enough. Bill is close enough to the state line. Like he can see over the Red River and say, "Man, I wish I was." It's like the grass is so much greener right over there.
I don't know about the wish part, but yes, I can see right over.
Hey, we have reliable power.
Okay, so if we're thinking about like civilian cybersecurity teams that can help, yes, and for guards, amazing. That's awesome. That's a nice plug. Thank you for that, Eric. But okay, so recently, Oklahoma did a thing where, hey, Oklahoma State employees can go be public school teachers. We're encouraging them to, if they can balance their workload, take time off, go be a public school teacher. The thing that they didn't think about, though, is that to be a public school teacher, you have to go through certain background checks. So if we were to have volunteers, civilians, whatever, helping in a pinch, there are certain background checks they would have to have clearance for to be able to help with certain things. So like you mentioned OSBI. OSBI has some of the strictest requirements for working with them of any other state SBI unit. Like it's level 2 clearance. I've had colleagues that's, man, hey, I was in the military. I had top secret clearance level with NSA, and it was harder to get through OSBI's level 2 background check. Like checking residences, talking to your neighbors, they're doing your credit score. It is super intensive. So that's another level of preparation that I think those type of, I'm going to start calling them militias now, our cybersecurity militias.
I like it.
I like it. So I'm sticking with it.
We should promote that.
Our cybersecurity militias are going to need to be prepared for that, depending on their skill set and their level of involvement.
Yeah, I think there would be some challenge, and that's part of the political discussion. If I remember correctly, when it started in Michigan, it was the governor pushing it, and it was an executive branch like, hey, which I'm afraid is how Oklahoma is going this route. And they tried that, and because of politics, they couldn't gain momentum. And eventually they kind of had to take it away from the governor and pass legislation to make it happen, the funding and the organizational structure and all that. So we'll see. I don't know. I know we got folks from other states on here too, but if anybody is interested in building something like this out in your state or getting people involved, please let us know. I've got some contacts and we can hook you up with all the resources that you want.
Yeah. I would say, cool. On that note, just thinking about, elected officials, if you want something like this to be sustainable, you have to think about support beyond the current election cycle. Yeah. Because you could have something that's gaining traction and it's getting built because you have support from, these people that are in certain positions, but then the election comes and this is not a important point maybe for newly elected officials and their constituents. So your initiative dies.
Yeah.
So just yeah, reach out. We'd love to have deeper conversations about that.
Yeah, totally. I had a friend who was the NASA administrator for a while, and we would bump into each other at the airport, and like we saw each other at church and the airport. That's like the only time we ever saw each other. But we would sit and chat once in a while, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, there's all these cool things. Everybody's like, why doesn't NASA do this? Why doesn't NASA do that? He's like, look, by the time an administration appoints the administrator, it takes about a year to get appointed and approved. And then you've got about 2 years before the next election cycle starts. And so you really only have 2 years to get anything done. So that's so common with government agencies. It's like you got 2 years to try to get stuff done, and then 2 or 3 years of nothingness. It's so frustrating. That I've always said I would make a horrible president, but I would make a fantastic benevolent dictator. Just put me in charge of everything and I will fix it. Right? This is being recorded, isn't it? Maybe I should say that. Did you guys see the article on the Cyber Safety Review Board? I think this is kind of in line with what we're talking about.
Okay, no, I didn't review that one.
Okay. Here's the link. So we can talk about the idea, because that's really all I care about. Did you see this, Bill?
I saw it. I actually wasn't sure what to think of this one.
Yeah. So if you remember back in April or May of last year, President Biden put out a
the cybersecurity initiative.
The cybersecurity. Yeah, it was an executive order that basically says, hey, look, we got to fix this crap. I'm summarizing. But one of the things he called for was a cyber safety review board of like coming together and saying, what are major threats to not just the government, but the country, and what do we need to do to fix it? I think this is interesting, the actual first progress of this. We talked about it on one of these webinars several months ago, but looking at they basically created a 15-person board. It's made up of a mix of the NSA, FBI, CISA, and some others, along with execs from Google, Microsoft, Verizon.
I was going to say all departments I don't trust very much.
All the 3-letter agencies. Oh, but it's not just the government agencies; it's the tech giants as well, right? Like that actually was a concern of mine. It was like, all right, so there's a lot of people that have a lot of vested interests in maintaining certain technologies and certain things the way they are. Where's the other side, like the privacy people and the anti-government folks, to say, hey, maybe let's consider this perspective too. But I think the idea is good. I mean, overall, the idea is, it's sort of like what's the consumer safety? You know what I'm talking about? There's a consumer safety organization that does the same thing. It's a federal agency, but their job is basically, what presents harm to consumers? What do we need to do to fix it? Or,
I know which one you're talking about. I can't think of the name right now, though.
Is it the EFF? Yeah, the EFF would be great to have some role. Well, maybe. I've got a love-hate relationship with it.
Is it kind of like HIPAA, though? Is it where there's a security section and then there's a privacy section, and those two are very clearly separated for specific reasons?
I'm sorry, I've gotten too many. That's
excellent. You should, if you're a government. Okay, I think there's value in conflict. You should have people that are opposed to you telling you their ideas and perspectives. And I think, to not go off on a political tangent, I think that could be the problem with some of the things we're seeing in our culture today, is that people have this narrow vision where they only surround themselves with people with the same ideas. And it's like, if you think different from me, unfollow. I'm going to unsmash that like and subscribe button and go listen to someone else who says what I already think.
Yeah, totally. Several people have mentioned the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's more from a financial perspective, banking and all that. I was thinking the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC. Both have very similar mandates, I guess, of identifying things that harm consumers and how do we fix it at a higher level, right? Because if you depend on all of the individual companies to fix something that none of them have power over, it's not going to happen. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. I hope we can continue to see stuff. In that article I posted earlier, they're using Log4j as their first, like, hey, this is a big thing. that you need to fix.
So my understanding is that once they've collected all those analytics, once they've collected all that information, is they're going to do, I don't know if it's going to be a white paper. I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's how they're going to consolidate that information, but to hand that out to people and say, across all of these different industries, across all of these different spectrums, that type of analytics, I could see that being really, really useful. Again, still kind of wait to see how it unfolds, but it's got potential.
Definitely. I'm a little concerned about that, where they go with it. If the goal is let's identify threats and let's provide resources to help people, that would be awesome.
Right.
If their perspective is let's identify people who are like companies that are not doing good enough and sue them or find them,
it becomes regulatory.
Yeah. It's like, do you remember Buckyballs? Did anybody have Buckyballs? Do you know what I'm talking about? Hold on. I gotta see if I can get this.
Like, is it like the gas station Bucky? Like, is that what you're talking about? Something from there?
Buckyballs were these like, the rare earth magnets. They're these little bitty balls that they had little bitty tiny ones and then bigger ones, but they were like super strong magnets and you could do all kinds of cool stuff with them and play with them. They were the first company that really made rare earth magnets common. And there were lots of knockoffs and lots of others, whatnot. Somehow somebody got frustrated with them and filed a complaint with the CPSC saying, oh, little kids play with these and, swallow them and it's dangerous and all that, even though they very clearly, didn't market to kids and did all this stuff. Anyway, I bought a bunch of these. I got the little square ones. They're so much fun to play with. You can do so many cool things with them. But like the CPSC basically put them out of business. I think they came back later. Like they sold off some of the intellectual property. But the CPSC basically said, we think this is a danger, and put them out of business, even though there were like 1,000 competitors doing the exact same thing. To me, that's my concern with the Cyber Safety Review Board is that it becomes just more regulatory political stuff than actual safety.
So things could always evolve that way. But right now, and like in that article that you linked, like it very specifically says the mandate of the CSRB will be to investigate significant cybersecurity events that affect government and industry and produce reports containing recommendations for improving the nation's cybersecurity resilience. So in this current environment, I think the only way that we're going to see like some type of legislation or like, throwing a hammer down on a company is going to be if the data from this organization or committee, board, whatever, goes to some other legislative committee that actually does have authoritative power, or lawmakers want to use data from this board to create legislation.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. Since this was created, it's part of DHS, but it was created by executive order. I don't know what authority it has to do. To your point, like, can they fine people, or does it have to pull an FTC or something like that?
So for any kind of administrative type things, there's a couple caveats they have to meet. So one of those is it can't conflict with any other existing laws, and it has to be available to go through a judicial review. So there's a couple different requirements for any kind of administrative, and executive order fall under those administrative type governmental, what's the word I'm thinking of, orders or decrees. Yeah. So there's a couple caveats to that. There's a couple protections, but the administrative side of things is a lot of times where pieces like this get a good foothold. So it really, any tool that we have can be used and misused, right? That's what we do for our daily work, right? Legitimate things in ways that it wasn't intended for for doing something that's not expected. My actual thought with this is, and this is something I've always thought back when I did compliance for the energy industry. One thing that I've always thought is the individual companies, the individual utilities, they have their own strongest, best interests in mind, and a lot of the regulatory because we have this contrast between something that is security focused versus something that is compliance driven or regulatory driven, and sometimes those
aren't
two,
as clear.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a clear conflict between those two interests.
So are you saying that this is going to be like the pharmacy companies that create their own studies on their own products, and it's like they're gonna. We
Absolutely. I guarantee you that will happen. There will be people that say, you know what, let's commission this study to demonstrate that this particular vulnerability is not as significant as this government agency says it is,
or it's more significant,
or it's more significant, or vice versa. Yeah. Or, gosh, I hope that
I see the potential for it.
Yeah. We have seen organizations say, you know what, we're not going to scan this environment because we have regulatory requirements that if we discover flaws and vulnerabilities in this environment, we have a lot more hoops that we have to jump through. And
there's an overhead.
Yeah, there's if something happens, a breach, that is going to be less expensive than dealing with all the compliance and regulatory stuff. So we just don't want to know. And that's specifically because of the response to poorly written political regulations like that. So I don't know. My concern is that the ramifications of legislation like that and regulations aren't always obvious. And a lot of the people that are writing them don't understand some of the implications.
So another perspective. Their first review is going to be on Log4j. That was December 2021.
Mm-hmm.
With how fast our industry moves, how valuable is that really going to be to anyone? If you still got issues with Log4j, and I know people probably still do, there's finances, there's executives, all these different things. But I mean,
that's a good point.
How valuable is it going to be with the time frame that, there's a certain level of.
Hold on. Wait a minute. It almost sounds like you're saying that an executive order designed to push the government into private industry to protect the people is not the most efficient way to get things done. Like, that can't be what you're saying, is it?
I'm saying that government has a history, and government historically moves very slow.
Yeah.
And, as we have different types of politicians that are being elected, that's one of their big things. Like, in the private industry, we can go in and we can get things done, and I'm going to bring that to government. And I mean, that would be great, but can you rewrite statutes? Can you get the Constitution amended? What can you do, buddy? I appreciate it, but we gotta abide by all these different protocols. But it's just really, I mean, we're 3 months later and you're giving us a report on what happened and what you should do to protect yourself. I'm sure that's going to help a lot of people that are smaller entities and aren't able to take quick action. But I mean, what's the value? Does a board like this, to have value on a wider scale, need the resources and the dedication to actually act faster?
So
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it makes me think, just when you're talking, the thought popped into my head that I wonder if the Log4j is kind of like the buzzword to get some of that momentum rolling.
Or, like, where's the overlap with CISA, with CISA? Yeah. Where's the overlap with some of those other organizations that you have CISA, putting out real-time notifications, sending bulletins, newsletters? If you're not subscribed to those, you really should. But where's the overlap with some of those? And maybe that's it. It's like, hey, you have someone like CISA who's going to give you some real-time information, but then the CSRB is going to do that deep dive after action report type thing.
I think,
I don't know.
I'm like stuck in this like pessimistic but also optimistic position. I think CISA, like, they're part of this, they're on the board, and so I think the goal is that CISA is going to provide the real time, here's what you need to know, and the is it CRSB? I never can remember the acronym. CSRB. The CSRB will be the more, hey, this is a big thing and you have to do at least this. If you're not at least doing this, then you are negligent. That's where I think this is going. And I think that will help, to Eric's point. I think that will help some of the smaller organizations that they're like, do we really have to do that? We can't afford that. Is this really that big a deal? But I think it will also hurt them because it's going to create more. It's like PCI. PCI hurt the smaller businesses the most because it's the cost of compliance was a bigger percentage of their revenue, right?
Right.
That's my concern. So I don't know.
I'm going to go on a tangent, and you guys hate me, love me. I don't care. I'm going there. When you said the word negligent, the first thing that popped into my head is that's a very, very legal term.
That's what I meant it that way. Yeah.
If we have a federal agency claiming negligence, so let's run with log4j, right? Mm-hmm. So this review board issues something and says, hey, if you haven't done this, this, and this, and you get hit by log4j, then you are negligent. Then that person has something happen. They have an incident. They file a cybersecurity insurance claim. It's going to get denied. If there aren't certain riders and verbiage in place, I mean, even now with ransomware, we're seeing things. I'm hearing from clients. It's, oh yeah, we went to renew our cybersecurity insurance, but we had to have special riders until we have like MFA on all remote access. And so, and even with the Russian attacks on Ukraine, it's when NotPetya started trickling over to U.S. companies and other organizations. Cyber insurance firms were like, guess what? That's one of our exceptions for that was a war activity. That was like a nation state action. That was an act of war. So insurance doesn't cover you. So how is that going to change that entire landscape? So many small businesses are like, oh, I've got cyber insurance. I'm good.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I can't remember the name of the board. There's what's that? Like the air traffic. Hold on. There's like an air traffic safety. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Organization?
Pushing 10.
No, I can't. There is a. It's not a federal agency. I think it's a private or like a semi-private public thing where anytime there is NTSB. Anytime there is a transportation issue, the NTSB, especially related around airlines, the NTSB steps in and says, you've got to give us all this information, private organization, private, American Airlines, United Airlines, Delta, whatever. You no longer have the autonomy to do what you want. We have federal authority for you to force you to give us this log data and to investigate this incident and to determine whether or not you were negligent and exactly what the cause of this was. And that has massive impacts. And I want to say that hold on, I'm looking at the executive order. It didn't specifically mention that, but that was what everybody was talking about when that came out, was that effectively Biden is calling on a review board similar to the NTSB. And if that happens, that will be horrible, I think, for exactly the reasons you're talking. But I don't know. It's one of those up in the air. We'll see what happens, I guess. So, all right, let's see what else we got. Any other? We're getting low on time. I thought this was interesting. There's two articles on phishing that I thought was interesting. The first is that a couple months ago, we talked about how Google was going to be pushing out required two-step authentication. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily multi-factor authentication. It's two-step, which could be multi-factor.
I was looking at that, and my first thought, because I went to go look up, what do they mean by two-step? And it looks like the way they define it is something you know, something you have. So it's two-factor. So I'm like, why are you calling it two-step? Unless it's a marketing, or if it's a redefining a term, or if it's some other type of.
So generally, and maybe this is just The Verge. Yeah, I know, reliable source here. Maybe it's just their stuff. I thought that Google has options where it doesn't necessarily have to be two-factor, where you can use the same factor twice. And so if you use the same factor twice, it's not, like if I have something I know and then something else I know, it's not necessarily two-factor. Jeff said they've always called it two-step, especially in financial services and banking. It's very common to have two-step authentication instead of two-factor authentication. I know Google allows two-factor, but I don't think they require it, is my understanding.
I feel like there's a really bad dad pun in there about when Google established an office in Pryor, Oklahoma, and they needed to two-step to Tulsa time or something.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Google's in Pryor? Nobody knew that. Julio says two-step is less confusing for normal humans than MFA. Maybe less secure, less confusing. That could be. Using a single factor twice. Effectively, it's something and then something else. But what I thought was interesting is that there was all this like, hey, is this really going to help? Is it going to be more hassle? Is it worth it? And according to their stats, account hacks dropped by half. That's
So that was part of their test samples. So
yeah.
But I could absolutely see that happening. I mean, you take a weak password, you take reused passwords, you take all these other things, and if you've got two-factor, that's a huge improvement.
Yep. This other article, which I thought applies really to what we do, all three of us. I don't know, Carrie, do you guys do like phishing and vishing and stuff like that,
No.
social engineering stuff, or not?
No vishing. No.
Maybe
to a certain level.
Yeah, you're a consultant. Yeah. I had a friend that used to call us consultants. We'll do whatever you pay us for. That's not entirely true. We say no to some things, but
I don't have the safe behind me in this office.
Yeah. What was interesting about this article was that folks found out, or some statistics here, that if you combine vishing with phishing, so if you call people and tell them what you're going to do first, and then you send them a phishing attack, they're 3 times more likely to
that makes sense.
Fall victim to that.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
When I worked in the point of sale industry 15 years ago, we had a situation where somebody called some of our customers and said, hey, we're with Tulsa Cash Register at the time, and we need to send you a critical update to your POS system. It's very important. We're going to mail you a CD. This wasn't even thumb drives back then. It was a CD. We're going to mail you a CD, and we need you to, as soon as you get this, to put it in your system and run it. And fortunately, we had a customer that says, that sounds unusual. Let me call and see what's going on. And, then we had to get law enforcement involved and, figure out exactly what was going on. But that was so long ago that to me, it just seems like, well, yeah, duh, obviously that works.
We actually had that as part of one of our processes when I was doing like DoD contracting for the healthcare stuff on base. There were some systems every month there was a new disk that came in for that
really?
exact purpose. Yeah. Because there's earlier, Carrie had mentioned about SCADA systems being some of the first things affected in a situation like this.
Yeah.
There's so much legacy equipment out there.
That's
and
true.
The amount of controls that are even possible on systems like that are minimal.
Tim said, if you'd sent me phishing via a free 40 hours of AOL CD in the late 90s, you would have gotten me. Yeah, that's a good point. I was a unlicensed pharmacy tech in high school, and because our boss was cheap and didn't want to pay us. But we got a QS1. I'm surprised I still remember that. QS1 was the pharmacy software we used. And I remember getting a purple floppy disk every month that update, or maybe every quarter, something like that. It was often. I'd forgotten about that till you mentioned it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't know that we've ever actively done that, but I think that's going to have to be part of our phishing repertoire now. I like that idea.
I bet we could pull it off.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, it's getting close to the end. Are there any other... Oh, one more article. All right. We've got to throw this in there. This made me chuckle. I don't know if you guys saw this one. The Pentagon is having a problem with their soldiers. Oh, that's not the right link.
Nintendo.
You can't get to the Trello article here.
Don't let soldiers plan their own flight plans, or you're going to get some drawings in the sky.
Right. The Pentagon discovered that the Nintendo generation has weak skeletons. Did you guys see this?
No. What?
So basically Gen Z is suffering significantly more injuries in boot camp than prior generations. And what they found out is that people are breaking bones more often because they don't have, I don't know what to say, like bone density, maybe. They haven't been required to go outside and play enough, and so they can't compete well in the military.
Have they done studies, or is this just speculation, or are they actually like, oh, hey, it's because of lack of physical activity, or is it like, oh, you didn't get enough vitamin D because they give you more options for drinks in school than whole milk?
Yeah, I don't think that they know exactly. They the press release, the article has a link to a press release that I scanned. Basically, they're saying they're seeing significantly more injuries, and they're speculating based on that of. We see injuries ranging from acute fractures and falls to tears and ACLs, muscle strains, stress fractures. Overwhelming majority of injuries related to overuse, not just the Air Force. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
To all who don't know, Julio's actually served in the Air Force, so he's totally allowed to make puns about the Air Force.
Yeah, exactly.
There were some deployments we were out there playing Medal of Honor just in the middle of the desert.
Well, I mean,
So you say that a guy I went to high school with, he served for, I don't know, several years, and he was in he worked out of a semi-trailer in near Las Vegas in Nevada. And so every day he would go up in this trailer and he would fly drones around the world from this trailer. You know, like there was one of those movies where they were shooting. What was the movie where they were like shooting, like doing drone, like assassinations and whatnot, drone strikes from Nevada? I don't remember what it was. It's not. It's not secret anymore. But I want to say maybe like the Edward Snowden movie or something like that. One of those where like there were some whistleblowers. But yeah, that's what he did. Is he spent like 2 years flying drones out of a trailer. I don't know. Do they still require boot camp for that level of like video games, basically?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, we are up to the end of our hour. I really appreciate having you guys and everybody that joined us, the attendees. Thanks for all the great comments and chatting. I will throw out again the professionallyevil.com. Hold on. Let me just get that link. If you want to join us in our Slack channel. Boom, there it is. It's a pretty low volume channel. We've got several low volume Slack team. We've got several different channels, but it's a great place just to jump in and get involved and ask questions and talk to other folks from other places.
Just remember that it is public. So when you're typing things, leave the private stuff out.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is Kevin and I do a bi-weekly podcast called the Professionally Evil Perspective. I'll post that link here. You can get that on Libsyn. And the reason I'm mentioning that partly is so someone other than my mom listens to it. But also, I've started taking this Lunch and Learn audio, and we're releasing that on the feed as well. Hopefully that will draw more attendees in here and whatnot. But anyways, yeah, we'd appreciate the, whatever. If you find it valuable and enjoyable, if nothing else, Kevin and I enjoy ranting it's about 20 minutes every other week or so. So with that, we'll wrap it up and end the webinar. Carrie, Bill, you guys are awesome. And I look forward to that karaoke at B-Sides OK.
Yeah.
Straight up, man. If anybody in the chat wants to sponsor that B-Sides karaoke, sponsors at bsidesok.com. I'm totally getting some marketing in there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Market free. B-Sides is all free and volunteer, except for training, of course. But
yes.
So yeah, still community driven.
Very cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thank you guys. Take care.
I can't find